What if I told you that one single Linux desktop update might have just rewritten nearly 4 decades of how we use computers? Not evolution, but a complete reset. And most people still don't realize it yet. GNOME 50 isn't just another version number. It's a turning point, the kind of moment that future tech historians will look back on and say, this is where everything changed. For 38 years, Linux has been building, improving, refining, sometimes breaking, sometimes reinventing itself, but always carrying one core idea. Flexibility over simplicity, power over polish, freedom over familiarity. And now, suddenly, GNOME 50 flips that narrative in a way we've never seen before. To understand why this matters, you have to go all the way back. Linux didn't start as a polished operating system. It started as a hobby project, something raw, something... Over time, it became powerful, incredibly powerful, but also fragmented, different. Desktop environments, different philosophies, different work. KDE went one way, GNOME went another, and users were left choosing between customization and simplicity. GNOME itself has gone through controversial changes before, especially with GNOME 3, which shocked users by abandoning traditional desktop layouts. That was a bold move, but GNOME 50. This is something else entirely. Because GNOME 50 doesn't just tweak the interface. It redefines what a Linux desktop even is. It's not trying to copy Windows anymore. It's not trying to imitate macOS. It's not trying to satisfy power users at the cost of new users. Instead, it's doing something that Linux has struggled with for decades, creating a unified, intentional, deeply integrated experience that actually feels modern. Fast and complete right out of the box. The first thing you notice when you boot into GNOME 50 is how everything feels cohesive. Not just visually, but behaviorally. Animations aren't just smoother, they're meaningful. Every transition communicates something. Opening aplicativos, switching workspaces, interacting with the system. It all feels like one continuous flow rather than separate components stitched together. This might sound small, but it's massive. For years, Linux desktops felt like collections of tools. GNOME 50 feels like a product. And that's the shift. That's the moment where Linux stops feeling like something you assemble and starts feeling like something that's already complete. Performance is another area where GNOME 50 quietly changes everything. Historically, GNOME has been criticized for being heavier than alternatives. People would recommend XFCE for speed, KDE for customization, and GNOME for well-designed. But now, GNOME 50 challenges that assumption. It's not just smoother, it's smarter. Resource management has been reworked so that animations don't lag even on mid-range hardware. Background processes are handled more efficiently. Input responsiveness is tighter. The result is something that feels fast without sacrificing visual quality. And here's where things get interesting, because this isn't just about performance or design. It's about direction. GNOME 50 signals a future where Linux is no longer defined by what it lacks compared to other operating systems, but by what it does differently and, in many ways, better. Take the new interaction model. For years, desktop computing has been stuck in a pattern. Taskbar, start menu, desktop icons. GNOME challenged that before, but GNOME 50 refines it into something that finally clicks. Workspaces feel natural. Multitasking feels fluid. You're not managing windows anymore. You're navigating a space. And once you get used to it, going back to traditional desktops feels outdated. This is where some users will resist. And that's expected. Every major shift in computing history has faced backlash. When smartphones removed physical keyboards, people complained. When touch interfaces replaced buttons, people resisted. But over Chimi, the better idea wins. And GNOME 50 feels like one of those ideas that might take time to fully appreciate, but once it does, it changes expectations permanently. Another major piece of this transformation is consistency. One of Linux's biggest challenges has always been fragmentation, different apps using different toolkits, different styles, different behaviors. GNOME 50 pushes harder than ever toward a consistent ecosystem. Apps feel like they belong together. Settings are unified. Design guidelines are actually followed. It's subtle, but it creates a sense of trust. You know what to expect when you open something. And that's something mainstream users value more than almost anything else. But this raises a bigger question. Is Linux losing its identity by becoming more unified? Is this shift towards simplicity and cohesion taking away the freedom that made Linux special in the first place? The answer isn't as simple as yes or no, because GNOME 50 doesn't remove flexibility, it just hides complexity behind a cleaner interface. Power users can still tweak, customize, modify. The difference is that new users don't have to deal with that complexity unless they choose to. And that's a huge deal, because for the first time, Linux isn't just for people who are willing to learn it, it's becoming something people can just use. And this is where the idea of 38 years of Linux history ended starts to make sense. Not ended in the sense that everything before it is irrelevant, but ended in the sense that a chapter has closed. The era of Linux as a niche, enthusiast-driven desktop platform is slowly fading. In its place, something more accessible, more refined, more complete is emerging. You can see this shift in how developers are approaching GNOME 50 as well. There's a stronger focus on user experience, not just functionality. Features aren't just added because they're added because they make sense within the overall design. This kind of discipline is what separates good software from great software. And it's something Linux has historically struggled with due to its decentralized nature. Hardware support is another area where this change becomes visible. GNOME 50 works more seamlessly with modern hardware, from high refresh rate displays to touchpads and even hybrid devices. Gestures feel natural. Scaling works better. Multi-monitor setups are less of a headache. These are the kinds of things that average users notice immediately. And they're also the things that have held Linux back in the past. And then there's Wayland. For years, Wayland has been the future that never quite arrived, promising better performance, better security, better everything, but always with caveats. GNOME 50 finally makes Wayland feel like the present, not the future. It's stable enough, polished enough, and integrated enough that most users won't even think about it. And that's exactly how it should be. So when you combine all of this, the design, the performance, the consistency, the hardware support, the maturation of Wayland, you start to see the bigger picture. GNOME 50 isn't just an update. It's the point where multiple long-term efforts finally come together into something cohesive. Of course, it's not perfect. No release ever is. There will be bugs. There will be missing features. There will be users who prefer older work. That's inevitable. But the significance of GNOME 50 isn't in its perfection. It's in its direction. Because for the first time, Linux has a desktop environment that feels like it knows exactly what it wants to be. Not a copy of something else, not a compromise between competing ideas, but a clear, confident vision of the future. And that future is surprisingly simple. A desktop that gets out of your way, a system that feels fast without needing constant tweaking, an interface that makes sense without needing tutorials, a platform that can finally compete not just on ideology, but on experience. This could have massive implications beyond just Linux enthusiasts. Developers might start targeting Linux more seriously if the user experience becomes predictable. Hardware manufacturers might invest more if the platform feels stable and unified. Even average users who have never considered Linux before might start to see it as a real alternative. And that's the real story here. GNOME 50 isn't just important because of what it changes today. It's important because of what it enables tomorrow. Imagine a world where Linux laptops are sold in stores next to Windows and macOS devices. Not as niche options, but as mainstream choices. Imagine software companies releasing Linux versions on day one, not as afterthoughts. Imagine a desktop environment that doesn't require explanation, that just works, that feels natural. That world has always felt just out of reach. Close, but not quite there. GNOME 50 might be the release that finally pushes it over the edge. But there's also a risk, because with greater simplicity comes greater responsibility. GNOME's decisions will shape how millions of people experience Linux. If they get it right, it could accelerate adoption in ways we've never seen before. If they get it wrong, it could alienate the very community that helped build Linux in the first place. That balance between innovation and tradition is delicate, and GNOME 50 walks that line in a way that feels bold, but also calculated. So where does this leave us? Are we really witnessing the end of 38 years of Linux history, or are we just seeing another step in an ongoing evolution? The truth is, it's a bit of both. The past isn't erased. It's built upon every decision, every experiment, every success and failure has led to this moment. GNOME 50 is a result of decades of learning, refining, and rethinking what a desktop environment should be. But it also marks a new beginning. A shift in mindset, a recognition that Linux doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful, that it doesn't have to be fragmented to be flexible, that it can be both user-friendly and deeply capable at the same time. And that's why GNOME 50 matters, not because it's perfect, not because it's revolutionary in a single obvious way, but because it quietly changes the foundation on which everything else is built. Years from now, people might not remember every feature that GNOME 50 introduced. They might not remember the exact version number, but they'll remember the feeling, the moment when Linux stopped feeling like an alternative and started feeling like the future. And if that happens, if GNOME 50 truly becomes that turning point, then this might not just be the most important Linux release in decades. It might be the one that finally changes everything.